Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Star Wars Explained. We haven't done one of these in a while, but the High Republic Wave 2 is just full steam ahead, and I wanted to talk to somebody, anybody about it. So, welcome Daniel José Older back to the show, the writer for Race to Crash Point Tower and the still ongoing and excellent The High Republic Adventures. Both of them were excellent, actually. I don't want to say that just one of them was, because I really did love Race to Crash Point Tower as well.
I appreciate it, man. It's great to be here, and I really love the reviews you've been doing. Not just because they're nice to me, because reviewing isn't about being nice. Just because of how deeply you engage with the work. That's really the best part of reading everybody's responses. But you always take it with such, take it so seriously in the best way, and just go deeper, and it's great.
Well, that's kind of what I want to ask you about first, because I have been so impressed with the way that you've taken these stories that are for a younger audience, the High Republic Adventures and Race to Crash Point Tower. That's a middle grade story, and the Adventures line are generally for younger Star Wars fans. But still, you have this ability to write these teaching lessons into Star Wars that don't feel childish. Like someone like me in their 30s, I still feel like I am learning so much from you. So how do you do that? How do you pull that balance off?
Thank you. I'm learning a lot too, writing them, because these are all things that I think all of us are going through, like a very High Republic moment, in the sense of the world becoming much more dangerous than we, maybe knew it to be in a lot of ways over the past year. And so, I've been looking inward a lot, as a lot of us have. Meditation is certainly something that has helped me get through this period, and also just manage my workload and everything else. And so the things that I'm thinking about also really are reflected naturally in the work. We didn't set out to write a story, a mega story that speaks to this time as much as it does, because this time hadn't happened yet when we started working on it. But the opportunity arose, and here we are, looking face to face. I keep thinking about actually that moment of Farzala looking directly across at the panel of his master Obratuk from the past tense in issue 7, where he's remembering, the lessons that he was taught as a younger Padawan. And, I think we're all just trying to remember, like, things that helped us make sense of really difficult times. And that's what the young people are going through. And then, finally, it's that, like, young people are also, kids are, like, surviving this era too. And I think our job as people who write for young people is to help them find a language to talk about it, and give them, more tools to think through it. And story is the best language to think through trauma, to think through excitement and good things and success and victory and survival, and also the really terrifying things of life.
Well, you immediately brought something up that I'm like deviating off my script and my questions already, but
that kind of interview.
Yeah, right. Now you are writing some of the High Republic while we're in these times that you didn't write a story that would reflect them, but now has that changed at all moving forward? Is it affecting the way the story is going now, or how you're writing about it?
I think it's just making it better and deeper. It definitely is affecting it, less so in terms of plot and more so in terms of, like, what I think we collectively are able to give our characters in terms of our own processing. And it really comes from true life in a way that it might not necessarily have done prior to this. We've all had traumas, and we've all gone through stuff. And I don't know if we've ever globally done it to this level as a collective. And that's also what's happening in the High Republic, right? We start in the golden age of the Jedi, and very quickly things get very bleak in different ways. And so it's really the story of people coming to terms with how difficult the world can be, even in good times, quote unquote good times.
Well, both your book and the comics, like I said, you've taken like these moments where there are these classic Star Wars tropes or themes. You talk about fear and attachment and how you're not supposed to let them control you. In the 7th issue of the High Republic Adventures, you talk specifically about fear, and I really love this line, Farzala's master saying that fear is not the enemy. How can one expect to overcome something they've never experienced? How can we learn about something we've never felt? We cannot let fear rule us, but we are fools if we think we'll never feel it. And what I keep doing is taking, the High Republic Jedi and comparing them to what we see in the prequel era, where Anakin is more just chastised for feeling fear at all. They don't go beyond that. So,
Right.
well, first of all, is it a long process of writing and rewriting to impart Jedi Master level wisdom, or do you just nail those passages in one go?
It's hard to answer that without sounding like a brag, but I will say it like this: the hard part came from years of work that I did to get to understand those truths, right? So in a way, like putting them down on paper is the easier part, but learning them is the hard part, right? So I certainly went through many life lessons and difficulties, and challenged myself, and the world challenged me right back to learn that stuff. And I'm still learning every day a lot, and so it's that. I will say that Pablo Hidalgo specifically is really great as a resource and as a rabbi, basically, to just be there and like help with those scenes. He's always I sort of think of like a chronology. It's not linear, but the first couple scenes like that I wrote, he would jump in with a lot of suggestions and help out. And a more recent one I wrote, he had no comment except yeah, something at the end, like that was beautiful. And I was like, oh, I was like, growth, which mind you, I don't take like him jumping in. I low-key want him to jump in because he's so brilliant and smart, and his suggestions are so cool. So I love when he brings stuff, but he's particularly good at it. But yeah, no, it is complicated. It is hard. It is also like one of my favorite parts is like that combined with like really fun action and lightsaber fights, right? Like it's all there.
Yeah, I mean that's the past two issues 6 and 7 have been exactly that. Super fun. But I want to jump back. I jumped ahead a little bit earlier about the Anakin Jedi Council stuff. I'm curious what you, or maybe all the Luminous writers, what do you think is the biggest failing of the Jedi by the time of the Clone Wars era? What makes them so different from what we're seeing in the High Republic?
I do think it comes back to shame, honestly, more than anything else. I don't think one thing or another. It's too simple to boil it down to this one thing or another, right? Anakin made choices; those are his choices. The Council also made many choices, and I think it was a confluence of bad choices that led to the Emperor succeeding. But I do think I think we would have seen a very different galaxy in a very different situation, and the Emperor would have had to maneuver very differently if the Council was making decisions based on compassion more so than trying to shame people into being the perfect little Jedi, which is really the perfect little Jedi concept is really contrary to the larger framework of what it means to be a Jedi, right? Like, and that's something Lula is dealing with. Like she has that in her head, like so many people are just wanting to be the best, and she knows that's not really the way to be the best, right? It's very contradictory, but she's struggling with it, and she has elders around her, including her master Kansam and lots of other people, trying to guide her, gently lead her away from that, self path of just it being about her being the best. And she's also really compassionate and caring, right? So she's not an Anakin at all, but already we see the framework falling into place around her, the structures of people not trying to shame her, but just trying to guide her and let her be who she is and sort of figure it out on her own, which is totally different than what we've seen. I do think it comes back to shame. And I think like one of the lessons of the prequel trilogy is you can't shame people into being the way you want them to be. Like that doesn't work. You can't suppress those things, emotions. It's that conversation is, whether it's fear, whether it's love, whether it's attachment, like those things don't go away just because you tell them to. And it's very arrogant to think that they would, but that doesn't mean that they get to run your life and rule you and send you down paths that you shouldn't be going down.
That's you talking about leading through compassion. There was that one spot in Race to Crash Point Tower where Lula hugs Ram because he's having a hard time, obviously, and that just hit me. I was like, hold on a second, I don't recall a single time one Jedi hugged another. I was able to find Anakin hugs Ahsoka, but that feels like an obvious outlier. Right. And I was like, I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine the Jedi of the prequel era being like, oh man, you're having a tough time. Do you need a hug? Like that just doesn't happen.
That's so funny. What I hadn't noticed that, but I have noticed that my Padawans hug each other a lot. Like that happens in that moment. And in that actual moment, I had totally forgotten that she also uses the hem of her Jedi robe sleeve to wipe away his tears, which is such a poignant. Like I totally forgot I wrote that, and someone reminded me on Twitter, and I was like, "Ooh, man, that is heartrending. Like it's very sweet. But no, they're constantly hugging, and I realized it because I'll type these, these panel descriptions. It's like all the Padawans have a group hug, do it over and over, and it's hilarious to me. But like, yes, like they would and they should, and they're very affectionate for each other, and their friendship really is paramount in so many ways. And that's how, again, just like with fear, that's how you learn, to go beyond attachment. You have to have them first, right? You can't. And I will also say this: a lot of that comes from being a paramedic, which is not unlike being a Jedi in certain ways. But being a medic, you're constantly moving through the balance of having to have enough compassion to put yourself out there at risk and help somebody in their literal, potentially last moment of life. But also, if you get too attached to any single patient, you will fail all your other patients, right? If all you can think about when you're going off on the next job is the last job that didn't go well, you will hurt the person that you actually showed up to heal. So on a practical level, you cannot afford to be overly attached to any one patient. It's a very important and powerful lesson in detachment that doesn't involve being like an emotional rock, or all these kind of like toxic masculinity ideas of like, just like, no, I don't feel anything. I'm good. I'm over here. Like I'm strong, right? That's not what detachment means, unless you try to force it into that box of whatever, BS they got.
How do you think, or maybe you've had discussions about this, but how do you think Anakin, the king of attachment, would have fared in the High Republic era between characters like Zine or Ram or Elzar Mann? Like, I get the sense that you're all almost trying to show that he would have been great here, but that might be just.
To me, this, I don't know what, I can't speak for everyone else. I think for me, the secret of like Anakin's real heart of gold is in his relationship with Ahsoka. And like seeing that he can, be so caring and know how to maneuver through the rules on her behalf and like help her get, for the most part, do what she needs to do and like take her side, even, in just like the most divisive moments. That's like the sign of a true compassionate leader. And that lets you know just how twisted the Emperor must have really had him, Palpatine at the time, like really had him in order to like manipulate him. And I mean, certainly the darker heart was there always. But I think that's what the lesson is to me. Like, I don't really know for sure what direction it would have gone, because there's so many, there's so many possibilities, right? Like as soon as the Order would have treated him differently and he would have come out on a different like level, Palpatine also would have maneuvered with that and figured out some other methodology, right? And so it's very hard to say how it ultimately would have ended up, but it would have played out very differently for sure.
That's I go back to, and this is from The Rising Storm, but Elzar Mann, when he goes dark, all the other Jedi feel it, sense it. They're like, that was Elzar.
Right. The interconnectedness.
We need to, and they're like, we need to check on him and make sure he's okay. Right. It's not like, well, it's time to kick him out of the Order or anything.
Or with Zine, right? Like Zine has that moment too where she's like about to kill a dude.
Yep.
And she's immediately assumes that like it's over for her, because she also came up in a world where clearly they've already demonstrated in the short time we've seen the community that she came up in, they already showed us that they have zero tolerance for anybody being even slightly different, which is why she spent her whole life suppressing her own power, right? So that's her reference point for being like a little bit to the side. So the second she does something which is actually a major infraction by the Jedi standards, she just probably, in her mind correctly assumes that like, that's a wrap. See y'all later. I had a great time. It was amazing. I learned about who I am, and now I guess I gotta go. And they're like, no, we want you. We want to guide you. We can't make you a Jedi, but we do want to guide you towards the light as best we can. And also, everybody loves you, so like, you got to stick around. You're stuck with us.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the little details of like Ram going, I'm not really supposed to share this, but here's my lightsaber because I got to do this other thing. Like, that was all great.
That was a moment I was like, there's no way they're gonna let me get away with just a lightsaber handoff, but somehow.
I thought it was a wonderful moment.
It was a necessity
too, speaking of Zine, I was surprised that she or Lula haven't really been in this current arc of the High Republic adventures. I kind of thought that they were going to be the heart of every story, but I'm really loving the chance to spend time with Farzala and Quart. So what's the most fun about writing them as opposed to Lula and Zine taking this break from all the other Padawans?
It's just fun to like really have an opportunity. Comics is such a great opportunity to go deep with different characters and do exactly what we're doing. And by the way, Court is on deck, which is also really really. There's so much coming up with him that I can't wait to talk about. But with Farzala specifically, I think he's the most just centered and grounded and self-aware Padawan of them all. And yeah, like he's even aware enough to know that like Lula is more talented and powerful and like got it going on in a number of ways. Farzala is just like, I'm just me, I'm doing me. I love all my friends and I love being who I am, and we're gonna do this. And like he's just a good dude. He really takes care of everybody else. He's a caretaker, and he's also very brave and compassionate. And so it's fun, but it's fun to get into like, what does he do when everything goes wrong, right? What does he do when he feels the feelings he is not supposed to have, right? And how does he manage situations when everything is suddenly dropped in his lap and he's the only one? Because they've been functioning as a team this whole time too, and now not only is it too far away from everybody else, but those two immediately get separated, and now they're all kind of just dealing with their own stuff, and everything is going to pieces. And that's when the fun starts.
I'm glad to hear Court's got more coming up. As you can see on the background, I'm a big Court fan. He's been super fun. Have you seen AJ Starkiller on TikTok has cracked the code for Court's language? Have you seen that?
I have, and I will give you this exclusive fact, which may be a little bit heartbreaking. It's not actually canon. It is true, but it was not me writing that. So
okay.
So I will say collectors would do well to pick up those issues, because they'll probably be different by the time we get to the trade paperback. I think it's hilarious. Don't get me wrong. I was tickled, but it wasn't me.
Okay. So was that like the editor sliding that in? Or?
I don't know. I don't think it was the editor.
That's interesting.
I don't know exactly who it was. I have my ideas. It doesn't really matter. I'm not mad about it. I think it's effing hilarious, but it's also not canon. Because I actually, two reasons that it matters. I actually have a headcanon of what he's telling him. What
that was going to be my next question. Yeah.
Yeah. In my head, like I do have like a very clear idea of what he's telling Geode in that moment, which is why I'm surprised to find out I was wrong. But also, I really love the idea that a lot of people can bring a lot of different things to that moment. So like, as much as I do have a headcanon and whatever, it's just so cool that everyone's like, oh, maybe he's telling him about what he just went through, or maybe he's telling him what he was a kid, or maybe all these different possibilities. That's really the emotional thrust of that scene, is that we don't know, and we get to kind of import or project our own wonders about it onto it. It's more about not knowing, so knowing it kind of makes it not work.
So interesting. So is that going to be just how he is handled going forward? Like we're not going to know whatever he's saying, and probably. I mean that is okay. I like that you have your own head. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I know. I saved you the trouble of having to translate everything.
Although honestly, that's kind of a relief.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I know. I was really impressed. And that guy's awesome on TikTok. Like everyone who did, I know a thread went up on Reddit too, where someone translated. It's amazing to me that people did that, and it's a great honor as an artist to have people, like yourself and everyone just engage so deeply with the work that they're willing to like put that kind of time into it. I love that so much. So the whole thing I thought was hilarious, and I'm glad it happened because it was funny, but sadly it is not canon.
Okay. That is good to know. And honestly, anytime like a wall of Arabesh text comes up on The Mandalorian or something, I'm like, oh no.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Cats are going right to their keyboard to figure it out.
I'm getting pretty good at reading it, but not fluent yet.
Wow.
So what was it like bringing Geode and the rest of the crew of the vessel into the story? Did you do that specifically so Court and Geode could hug?
Kind of, actually. that was definitely the first thing that I knew I wanted to happen. Like very much. First what happened was I read the book. I love the book. Claudia's an incredible writer. She always has been. Everything she touches is gold, and she's really good at teams. And as soon as I read them, I was like, oh, I need to get these guys. Like it's such a rare and wonderful thing to be a writer and be in a crew and read work and love it and be able to then immediately just take those characters and like put them in something you're working on. Like that's a very rare opportunity that only basically Star Wars, can afford in this particular way. So it's really cool. So I read them and I was like, oh, these guys are going to be fun to play with. And then immediately I was like, wow, I have a guy that wears a skull hat and he's really short and nobody knows what he's saying. Like they have to be in conversation, like this sentient rock this Vintian. And so yeah, that scene like played out immediately in my head. That was the first thing that I knew had to happen. And then after that, I was like, well, let's see, what I also knew at that point, I knew that our story would branch off and Lula and Zine would be off in Crash Point Tower, basically on Valo, and Fazal on Court would be off dealing with Green Gear stuff. So I also really wanted to do like a diplomatic spy type mission story with them, just to sort of see how that would play out. And then I was like, well, of course they'd be with the vessel. And if the Hutts are involved, that's like a perfect opportunity to bring in these kind of scoundrel characters. It all just worked.
They do. They fit in so well. And I mean, half the fun of, or maybe 90% of the fun of Geode is having that moment where someone says something to him and then it's like, Geode stood there. And they're like, totally. So but then building off of that with someone who you can't know what they're saying, and then just like a blank shot of Geode, and then they're hugging. It's like, what are they saying to each other? So much fun.
Yes. That scene wrote itself. Like there was no pause. I was like, brrr. But also I love that like the bad guys are terrified of Geode.
Yeah. Well, I think I would be too.
Right. He just shows up places, like, which totally works in Claudia's book. And that's what I was trying to get at, like in the comic, is that, and you can almost do it in a whole other way when you have the visual opportunities. He's just there. He doesn't grow out of the ground. He doesn't jump anywhere. He's just there. And it's mind-boggling. And it completely throws everybody for a loop. And there's like one bad guy. That was how I tracked the bad guy, because there's those 3 like Jabba henchmen. And they all have names, and I had their names in the script. But the only way I could really track them was that the one guy that hates Geode. I was just like, okay, that guy. All right, where's he? Okay, now I know where the other 2 are. And then the droid who's like on some weird quest of his own.
The droid's fun too, yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Well, really, we recently learned that Court is an Aloxian, which is a new species. And I was curious, what is the process for deciding whether or not a character is a new species or one that's existed before? And when that's decided, how do you develop a brand new species in Star Wars?
That's such a great question. It really is dependent on story for the most part. Like if there's just no need to mention it, then sometimes and sometimes you don't. It sort of depends on the writer for sure. In the case of Court, I'm not sure when in the process it came up. I knew I wanted him to be his own species and something brand new. I think that was pretty clear from jump. I toyed a little bit with trying to do like an interesting reveal where he would have been like a Jawa or an Ewok or something, but they all felt very like, just very like, what's the word? Just like too much, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And it's so much more interesting, as we'll find out when we get more into his backstory and what the Aloxians are and everything else. Like, it's just more interesting when you get to really build something from the ground up that works with his character and who he is. And that's kind of the thrill and the point of bringing in a new species, right? If you're going to do it, like make it work and make it count and use the opportunity to like really build into something. So that seemed to make the most sense. And then it was just kind of a question of like biding my time story wise to figure out when are we going to really get to all this, and the time has come.
Great. So like next few issues. Cool.
Literally next month we begin what I don't know if it's titled this officially or not, but it's the Takodana cycle, basically, where they go to Takodana. We will meet a really cool new Jedi.
Interesting.
Sav Malagan, who is not a new species, but a species that we know and love. And
this is probably one of those questions that you're going to just say no comment on, but will the High Republic Adventures cross over at all with Out of the Shadows?
Out of the Shadows.
Or characters from it?
No, they are happening kind of simultaneously, I think, because this is all kind of like after the Republic Fair. So it's before. I know what you're referring to, and it's kind of before that.
Okay.
If you know what I mean. Because like, yeah, basically like we're jumping back into the story at a moment where now they've all come back and they're meeting back up after having gone on their separate adventures. So it's probably a similar moment to the whole sequence of events in Out of the Shadows.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we will see some old friends, and we will meet some new friends, and we will get a lot of juicy information about Quark.
Great. Well, I want to talk about your sense of humor a little bit, because I know everyone has their own views about how everything in Star Wars should be and what kind of jokes should or shouldn't be in Star Wars. That seems to come up a lot. So I happen to really, really love your sense of humor. what would you say is the core of comedy in Star Wars?
Oh man, what a great question. I have no idea. I clearly you can tell this from the interview. You know, I just try to make myself laugh. If it works, if I'll tell my wife what I'm doing, and it's not about whether or not she laughs. It's really about whether or not I laugh when I'm telling it to her. She has an excellent sense of humor, but she probably knows mine well enough that she can see it coming about a mile away. But no, what is the core of it? I think so much of humor in general is like situational, right? Like you don't go into it sort of being like, okay, I'm going to tell this joke. You just really like throw a lot of characters at the page and then see what kind of situations play out. I'll give you an example. I'm writing something now with Cham Cham and the Bonbrax, right? And not a whole thing, it's just a little section of something else. And like, Cham Cham, it's nothing that I planned way in advance or anything else. It's just that it's kind of the gardening method of writing, versus architecture. So writers talk a lot about whether or not we outline, and gardeners in George R. R. Martin's kind of way of thinking through things, gardeners just plant a lot of seeds and then let them grow naturally. And architects outline very meticulously. And obviously everyone kind of falls somewhere in between, including me. But with humor, I think a lot of it is very garden based in my own process, because I didn't come up with Cham Cham being like, oh, this is going to be great. He's going to eat some Nile, even though he's like a little, tiny little Chihuahua bat, pig, creature, scorpion. I just wanted her to have a pet, and I wanted him to be a mix of kind of like hell beast plus really cute, and see what happened, right? So the opportunity came up to have him meet some Nile, and now later I'm writing a scene where it's him and the Bonbrax. Bonbrax are very mischievous and very smart, too smart for their own good, and they like to play tricks on people, right? So if you have all these furry creatures running around, you have to throw them into the mix with each other and see what happens. And then you're like, all right, what would happen like if these guys were together? Like, oh, this, and then and then that moment when you're like, that's when you start writing.
I was going to bring this up later, but I think now is a more appropriate time. Is Cham Cham and the Bonbrax, is that what you're talking about in this tweet?
Yes.
That just seemed to make sense.
Absolutely. 100%. But also, not for nothing, the court Geode moment is a good example too, right? Which is kind of funny and kind of heartwarming moment, but it's also entirely situational based, right? It's like the obvious place to go in some ways, but also sort of startling in other ways, hopefully, where you have, like you said, a character who's a rock and who can just sit there and listen, and everyone projects all their stuff onto, and then a character that nobody knows what they're saying. Like, of course, he's got to give him a monologue. Like, first of all, he's never said more than 3 words at a time in the entire run. So it's almost like there's this joke building that I didn't even realize I was building towards. And now here's a great opportunity to like play off that, run with it.
The arc in the High Republic right now, High Republic Adventures and the Marvel High Republic issues, they've all been kind of about the alliance between the Hutts and the Jedi, which has been really fun and interesting. And you just brought Jabba into the story. What's the process like for bringing in an existing character while also making sure that you're not overshadowing the main characters and anything else going on?
No, that's exactly the question. The process is that question, basically. Is like, how is this character what kind of shadow is this character gonna cast? And is it worth it? And does it feel like more than just like a throwaway? Basically all those things. And to be fair too, I think sometimes throwaways are the way to go. There's certainly something there's something in Midnight Horizon that's an absolute throwaway, literally like a one line, and you'll know when you get there, and that's it. And that was the way to go, because sometimes I know there's a lot of ongoing conversation, and I think it's a really good conversation about small galaxy, right? And I totally get it. Like, and there are moments when you're like, wait, but also like, it's also really, really fun to see characters that you know and love show, pop up places. And also it makes it like people do run into each other, even in a big wide galaxy, in a big wide world. Like New York City is a great example, right? How many millions of people are there, and you're constantly bumping into cats, like that's just what it is. But it, and I think if you can do it in a way that feels true, it absolutely makes sense that Jabba would try to get involved in a situation on Nal Hutta and take advantage of, someone's instability and try to further that, to use that to his advantage. Like, that's absolutely something Jabba would do. So that was kind of the first question, was like, does this make sense? The second question was like, how? And then finally, you'll notice he's very not prominent in that issue, right? He's He's definitely
Yeah.
kind of the big bad, but he's the big bad behind the scenes. And we, only really get him there at the end so much. And that's just because we've been talking about him all this time. Like, we do have to see him, which, is what it is. But it's an issue that's very focused on everybody else. So I think that holds to do what it needs to do.
Oh yeah, I think that so far the balance has absolutely been nailed. I mean, Yoda even hasn't been like front and center, and now he's missing. I hope he's okay. Yeah.
I know he, like, obviously he lives, but it still cracks me up that I think the one calculation I made in like online discussion was I thought people would be more like concerned about Yoda. Like, he literally blew up. You know what I mean? Like, obviously he lives, but like, can we get a memorial tribute or something? Like, blew up in a flyer like over a very remote planet. Where is Yoda? He's been gone for months. Where is Yoda? Hashtag where is Yoda?
We've got Yoda, Jabba, and then obviously Yaddle recently popped up, and that was a fun one where just I think Justina did a great job of bringing Yaddle in, but also not having her talk like Yoda.
Right? No, that was great.
Do you guys know when you do things like that Star Wars fans are going to freak out about what's basically nothing? But I was over here like, oh my God, like Yaddle doesn't talk like Yoda. So which one of them talks weird?
Yes, we do, because we're Star Wars fans too, so we freak out about that stuff too. It's not like that, we're both writers and fans, so we're just like, oh, wouldn't this be interesting? I mean, sometimes like I'll absolutely admit to writing stuff to find out if that's what it is. And then like you get to discuss it and go back and forth with people who really know and are like deeply immersed in this, and that's their job. And you disagree sometimes, and you figure out a common ground, and then you go.
Okay, then just like for fully your opinion, and if it's gonna maybe come up later, if you don't want to comment on it, fine. But which one talks like Yoda's species? Is it Yoda or is it Yaddle? Okay,
that's a great question. It's not a secret. I literally don't have an opinion, but I fear that if I did, it would be taken as canon, and we can't have that. It's a great question.
Oh, thank you. Well, I wanted to talk a little more about Race to Crash Point Tower. We've been focused on High Republic Adventures, but your book was so closely tied with The Rising Storm. What is it like to write a story like that side by side with another author?
It's hard and fun and hard. It's both. I think the hardest part about it was that our deadlines were different. So it would have been hard enough just like coordinating kind of side by side, but for whatever reason, publishing and everything else, and corporations, I don't know why it works that way, but we had very different deadlines. Some of it was also not just the deadlines; it was just I knew I had to get certain things done so I could get other things done, and so my stuff happened way ahead of Cav's, which was hard because Cav was really the one laying a lot of the foundation of what was going to happen, right? So that made it really. That's kind of what the most challenging part was, I think, for both of us, is that we were writing just at very different moments. So I finished it, and then I was like, all right, this is done. And he was like, well, I'm still writing, and so we did our best. But on the other point, like, it was really fun. Cav is an amazing person and a great writer, an amazing writer and a great person. And, we had a great time, and we have a great rapport, and we bounced things off each other, and we kind of like honed in on the moment that we would cross paths and then went our separate ways. And right up until like copy edits, we were kind of like bouncing stuff back and forth and making sure things tracked. And then I threw a bomb into the whole thing by adding a whole other story, which comes out on Saturday in the free comic book day issue is like takes place like the minute after Race to Crash Point Tower ends. Yeah, that's totally a continuation of that story. It's almost like an epilogue. And Ty York shows up, all this stuff. So it was hard, but it was also very fulfilling. And I think that's the core of the project, is like finding that balance of like those moments of crossover without overplaying it. So people are like, all right, I'm reading the same scene over and over, right? But actually like doing something interesting with that scene and seeing how it's reflected differently through different people. I will say that the experience made me really enjoy doing that with myself instead of someone else. Not because Cav was difficult, but because it's just difficult in principle. But later you'll find out, with things with Midnight Horizon and the High Republic Adventures, there are a lot of moments where they intersect in interesting ways. And that was a lot easier to do when I didn't have to Skype someone in England. You know what I mean?
Right.
And actually, Trail of Shadows too, even. So they all, really do intersect, and they do have these moments where it's like, oh, that's that. Oh, true, true, true. Because I could, so I did, and throughout the project, you'll see that happening, which is one of the coolest parts about it.
Oh yeah, I love that, and that's so intriguing to hear that your deadlines were so different. I never would have guessed
Good.
that it was a
We did our job
challenge.
then. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that they fill in each other's gaps was so much fun to read them back to back.
Good. I'm very glad. That's great to hear, because we worked hard to make that true.
Well, how was it writing the Republic Fair for a middle grade audience? Because I mean, that's like a horrific story that Cav wrote in the novel.
Totally.
So how do you portray that without going, too dark or too far?
Yeah, it's a balancing act, right? Like, some of that is, I keep thinking about this. It's such an interesting notion. Like, speaking of balance, I guess, there's a kind of like a common thing that people say in writer circles, where it's like, write what makes you uncomfortable, right? And that's the story you're supposed to tell. And I get it. Like, I'm not knocking that. I definitely believe in it up to a point, but I think there's different kinds of discomfort, right? Like, sometimes you feel uncomfortable because it is some really heavy stuff for you that you need to deal with and go deeper. And sometimes you feel uncomfortable because you're doing something wrong. And that's your instinct being like, yo, like, back up, And as a writer, you need to learn to distinguish between those two discomforts, because they really will guide you, and they really will misguide you if you let them. And if you just take all discomfort to mean the same thing, it's not. And specifically when writing for young people, it's something I take very, very seriously. Like, it's an actual, it's really the most important responsibility that I have professionally in my life, is not traumatizing young people, but also not sugarcoating, the way the world is. That's the balance that we need to find as writers. And it's different for every person, and it's different for every reader. And that's part of why it's so hard. But also, like, I think Star Wars itself provides a lot of guidance in that. If you just look at the movies, which are beloved by kids, which I, as a 3-year-old, was completely obsessed with and on through my childhood. And that's the original trilogy, obviously. And so, they do a very good job throughout, I think, the whole saga of showing us, like, here's what's okay. Here's what feels a little too much. Like, here's the lines that we hit up against. So I really do use Star Wars as my guide, and the sort of balance of, like, fun, intense stuff, politics, gore, romance, like, all of those things are within a certain realm in Star Wars. And that's part of what makes it feel so Star Wars. And what I know is, if I kind of hew closely to that and keep an eye open for when I'm pushing it over the edge a little bit, then I will really land somewhere that feels right.
Yeah. I can't think of any just charred skeleton bodies in Race to Crash Point Tower. So I think you got that balance pretty good. That messed me up as a kid, but
no, that's intense. Like, it's a really intense scene, and I think it works in the larger narrative, and it doesn't feel like they don't, like, zoom in on it. Right? But that's part of that's why it feels so real, and that's true of the whole, especially that first movie. Like, the dewbacks are another example. You just scan past them, right? You just like, man, we're just panning, and there's like a dewback there. You're like, wait, I want to see that, right?
Yeah, hold on now.
Like, real, like, very true, and it's true of the gore. But the other thing I want to say is, like, Story Group is also, and Jen Heddle and Mike Siglane are really great at also just, and the rest of the writers, are really great at kind of, like, we all are in conversation about that and what's too gory and what's not. And so that's part of the checkpoint also, is just being like, okay, what do you think? What do you think? It's a group project.
Yeah. I really want to talk about Ram's talents in the Force, because I think it's a very interesting, unique ability. Because the Force, to me, is very much about visualization. So the fact that he knows machines so well, and that he can just visualize the piece in a blaster or a speeder that he needs to knock out of place, and he can picture that in his mind, that lines up with my beliefs in the Force really, really well. So how did you come up with that idea?
Thank you. That's great. That's exactly it. It's that I just really wanted him to, like, honestly, it's the way I feel about storytelling. I feel really at home writing stories and on the page, and, like, there's a thing that happens when you're writing, and you're like, first of all, there's a gradual process of feeling the story come to life in your hands and in your mind. And it's almost like watching something, like, become flesh out of steam or smoke, right? Like, go from illusion to, like, reality right in front of you. It's very magical. And then there's also a moment when you're kind of, like, between two possibilities, and then you really land on one, and that's right, and it becomes even more of a solid incarnate thing. And that's so magical, right? And it feels right when it feels right. And when it doesn't, you're like, oh, what's it gonna be? Like you're stuck between everything, and it doesn't. And you know those things, right? That's again, like that's about trusting your instincts and about really being able to interrogate, like, which kind of discomfort is this? Like, which kind of comfort is this, right? Is this the kind of comfort that's actually me playing into a cliche and that's why it feels comfortable and I need to push a little harder? Or is it the kind of comfort that's like, yes, this is a good story, right? Different. So all that, it's a language. Storytelling is a language. And I wanted to reflect that in something that's totally different and not even associated in any way with storytelling. And that is mechanics, which I am terrible at. Not terrible, but it's certainly not my first language, right? I can fix your average little tiny thing maybe if I use the YouTube. But yeah, so I sort of, that was also a challenge to myself as a writer to try to get, like a character to feel really lived in a school of thought that I'm not versed in, but also like Star Wars allows you to, it's a fantasy world, right? So you get to cheat a little bit and you can make up stuff. Again, Pablo is extremely helpful in these technology questions. But yeah, so it's that, I love the creative process and I understand what it means to want to just hide away and deal with that and nothing else because it's very manageable. And I also understand what it means to know that you can't just hide away because the world is much bigger than just our little workshops, and things that matter are happening that we have to take part in and be a part of and be a part of the world. So when Ram is thinking through like the part being the part of the whole and what that means, he really is thinking through his own role in the galaxy as someone who has powers. And yeah, like obviously like powers means the force, but also as someone who is like, feels a responsibility to like do right in the world and is a member of something really important, which is the Jedi Order, which is not just about hiding off in a mountain and not talking to anybody. It's about actually taking part in the world. And that's what Ram has to kind of understand as he moves forward.
I really, really love Ram the character, and just the way that this power that he has, I feel like has so much potential, and he just needs to like believe in himself more.
Totally.
And so I'm really looking forward to seeing him continue on. And I also don't have a question about this, but him trying to mind trick the security guy was one of the funniest thing. I loved that scene.
I was laughing the whole time I was writing that. Like I could hear it in my head and I was like, this is fun. Like this is good.
That was like the most relatable use of the force. That's how I imagine me trying to mind trick someone would go. It'd be like, that's not exactly what I meant, but
right. I also like
close.
I think we have to sort of show people struggling to use the force. Like it's not easy. And the Jedi that we know and love all make it look really easy because they're trained and they worked really hard to get there, but we don't often get to see them training and when they're not good at it. So I think there's so much cool storytelling to do just by dealing with that right in front of our face fact that the force is hard. It's not just like shoom and starships are falling out of the sky, right? Like
yes.
It's a challenge.
That's so many times I've had the question like, why didn't Obi-Wan use force speed to catch up to Darth Maul and Qui-Gon and save Qui-Gon's life? It's like, because it's not a switch that you can just be like force speed and I'm going. It's he's not balanced. He's not in tune with the force enough. So
yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk just a little bit about Wave 2 in general, because a lot of people are talking about the gut-wrenching final page of The Rising Storm. Woo! And I yelled at Cav a little bit about it, but is that fully his fault? Just should we hold Cav Scott responsible for that? Or is that something that we should hold all of you responsible for? Because I assume you all knew and you did nothing.
Nobody stopped that madman. What about the responsibility? It was, every large story beat that happens is a collective decision. I will say that. The decision to land on that page as the last page, that's all Cav, man. And it was a genius decision. I read it. I knew what was going to happen the whole time I was reading it. Nothing surprised me. And I was still like, what the like, are you kidding me? That wow, like devastating in a good way. Like, I love it. I think it's such an amazing end to a book. I think it's like brave and weird and sets up. The other thing about it that people don't yet fully understand is that it sets up so much of what's coming next. Like, it's such a perfect way to really like. That's I can't say more, but that's like it's a lot. It's a lot. It does such a great job of being like, this is what we're really doing. And I think, that's what it needed to do. So Cav did what he needed to do.
I'm glad that you had the same reaction as well. I remember vividly, I had it on my Kindle, so I was watching like the
That's
3 minutes left, 2 minutes left, and I was like, come on, Bell, come on, Loden, let's go. In that last
Yeah.
page. But is everyone giving Kevin the side eye now? Like, if he asks
we
to
all
use,
knew.
well, if he asks to use any of your characters in a future book, are you going to think twice about it? Or
It's like having George R. R. Martin around, like, you gonna kill that guy? You gonna kill that dude?
If he
No,
comes up and
because
he's like, "Hey, can Court be in my book?" You'd be like, "No."
what are you gonna do to him? What are you gonna
Yeah.
do to him? You can dust him? No, that'd be hilarious if we had such like miscommunication that we didn't know that someone could just randomly knock out people's characters. Like, oh my god, the chaos that would ensue. Fortunately, we all have a great working relationship where none of us would ever do that to someone else. I literally just texted a member of the team. I won't say because I don't want to start speculation about which character I'm talking about, but I did just text one of the team and was like, does this work? Which is like such a small thing to do, but it's really fun. Like, just to be like, hey, I can just bounce this off the guy who created the person of any gender who created this character, and and then we can chat about it. And it was really fun. And fortunately I nailed it. But I did that you all, Claudia, when I wrote the vessel. I was like, let me know what you think about this. We all do that with Justina. Like, that's how it works.
Yeah. You all did a Q&A. I can't remember exactly what it was for now, but I remember it was right before I think Wave 2 began, and Charles Soule said something about like killing off characters and just like, hopefully someone asks before they kill off a character you created. And I was just like, oh no. all this drama going on behind the scenes.
I mean,
but
no, definitely. I will say that that's not something you can expect writing Star Wars in any other situation, right? Like, anyone can take anyone that I wrote in Last Shot or something and just write something else where they die. Like, that's an understanding that you have going into Star Wars. And we are, like I said, we are fortunate to just have a close connection that would be a weird thing to do without talking to the person. But in general, writing IP in general and writing Star Wars specifically, where, the body count is high in Star Wars. And you kind of do have to go into it knowing that someone might just take your character and dust them.
Yeah. Well, let's talk what we can about future projects, because you've got quite a few coming up. You've got, I think next is the October Trail of Shadows release. Yes. So obviously I won't talk to you about plot so much, but in our last talk, you mentioned how much you love the underworld and gangster stories. So what are you most excited to share with fans in this miniseries?
That is just the fact that it's so, just like, let's just talk about style and voice, right? Like, it's the opposite end of the world from High Republic Adventures, and in terms of tone. And that is so much fun for me. Just across my career, I've written for all ages. I've written very different types of novels, from like literary, whatever that means, to, full on genre, whatever that means. But I do really live my best life in the kind of in between spaces and being able to move between those happily and freely. And that's really what I've been allowed to do by writing this at the same time, simultaneous comic series, one for all ages that is, has baking, and one for, very much for adults that is extremely noir, edgy, dark, creepy, just lots of fun. So yeah, it's that. I love that I'm able to do both those things. I will say, yeah, it's a dream come true project because I love noir so much. So Jedi noir is like, what? Like, those are my true loves. And we've seen it before, certainly. We've seen it in, I think Rogue One has some really great noir beats. And of course, the Clone Wars has the full-on detective stories going on that are so well done. So there's a chance to sort of take those and then mold them into my own voice and the High Republic, world and everything else. And just really go deep into places that we haven't seen a lot of in the High Republic yet, including some planets that we haven't even seen canonically much, but we've seen in other places. And also just having non-Jedi characters, I think team up with Jedi is always a really cool thing. And look, the other piece is like, politics are built into noir and built into Star Wars. I don't care what you think. But first of all, politics and war go hand in hand. War is politics, and politics is war very often. But also just like, there's great storylines about like, trade disputes and who funds what and economies and everything else. Like, it's really smartly done throughout Star Wars, from the very beginning. A diplomatic mission, right, started us all off, or not. And I think noir just always has it. Sometimes it's very localized with noir, where like, it's like these local crime bosses fighting each other or whatever, dirty politicians, like all that, and it's so great. So it's all right there. Like, the elements are all right there, and it's just so cool to be able to throw them all into one place, and then also have like the Force. And the last thing I'll say is it's very, very interconnected with the main story beats of the High Republic, right? It's not just like, oh cool, we have a little detective story going on the side. No, it takes up very literally where certain stories left off and goes from there, as you will see as we get closer. Hopefully they'll drop some preview pages soon. I hope that it's just really beautiful, but it's very, very interconnected. It's a part of the larger narrative in a very intense and dramatic way, and you will see.
Who's doing the art for it?
His name is Dave Wachter.
Cool.
He's incredible. Yeah, he's done a run of Alien and a couple other things. He's really, really good and stylistically perfect for it. It's so good.
That's one of the most exciting things about Wave 2, I think, is that Wave 1 was basically the 3 books and the 2 comics, and now it feels like, yeah, we're getting the 3 books, the 2 comics, and the audio drama, and another spin-off comic, and just a lot more, the manga. So yeah, it's fun to see.
Great, by the way. The manga is amazing. I read it.
I'm really excited for that. Yeah.
Super
just
good.
To see the whole thing expand is a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
We've also learned just a little bit about your third and the final wave of Phase 1, which starts in January. And your book is the young adult novel called Midnight Horizon, which you've mentioned a couple times, and that's like the coolest title.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Titles are really hard, man, so that means a lot.
Well, you described it as a chaotic mess. Can you give us 2 more words to describe it? Because I know you can't say much.
No. I'm gonna tell you what I told Alden too, which is that this is the best Star Wars book I've ever written, and the best Star Wars I've ever written, period. And it really is a culmination of the phase in many ways, and also like in a very specific way, like the through line that I've personally been working on throughout the whole phase, both in Star Wars Adventures and Crash Point Tower, like throughout. So it's also the culmination of the YA kind of like lineage. So a lot of things are coming to a head in this book, which is why it's such a chaotic mess, in a good way. Like it's very structured. So I don't want you to think it's just I just threw like different. No. But there's a lot of things culminate to this moment, and that's why I knew that going into it, and I was really excited to be given the opportunity to write it. It's a really big honor. I really wanted to step up to it, and looking back at it, like and reading it over, it's in edits right now. It really is just like my best work. Like I'm just really, really proud of it on a number of levels, and it really does feel like the culmination it needs to be. So I'm just excited for people to read it.
I'm very excited to read that.
Thank you.
So can I assume that maybe some High Republic Adventures characters are going to be in it?
You can assume that characters we know and love will show up along with new ones that we will meet. But I will also say that a lot of things are being seeded for that book right now and in the next couple months. So yes, definitely pay close attention to the stuff that I have my hands in, because there are characters that will kind of pop in and out that may, pop it in much more so moving forward.
Cool. The tagline for Wave 3 is "The light of the Jedi goes dark." Can you just give us assurances that everything is going to be okay and promise me here and now that nothing terrible will happen to anyone we love?
That's my answer.
Oh, no. A maniacal laugh is not the right answer.
Anyway, yeah. So enjoy.
We will. Oh, I cannot wait to finish up Wave 2 and then start Wave 3 next year. In the meantime, where can everyone find you and follow you online? And what other works have you written that a Star Wars fan would probably enjoy?
Thank you for that question, because I always forget. Okay, let me do my socials. They're not all the same name like they're supposed to be. On Twitter, I'm at DJ Older. On Instagram, I'm at Daniel Jose 1. And on TikTok, I'm at Daniel Jose Older. My website is danieljoseolder.net, DANIELJOSEOLDER.net. You can find a blog from back when I was a paramedic, actually, when I learned a lot of this stuff and learned a lot about writing. I also teach online writing classes, so some of those are posted. There's a website called Knowable and another called Skillshare, where I have video and audio writing classes posted up there. And finally, you can find all my books there, including my most recent middle grade that's not Star Wars, which is called Flood City. It came out in February. It is a very Star Wars influenced book. There's monsters and kids fighting and flying through the air, and it's the last city on Earth after floods have taken over, and it's a lot of fun. And my next young adult novel is called Ballad and Dagger. It comes out from Rick Riordan's imprint, Rick Riordan Presents, in May, and it's yes, also very Star Wars friendly. But that's an urban fantasy story about a kid named Mateo who just wants to play piano, but it turns out he was initiated to a secret god of healing from an island that sank in the Caribbean that was full of pirates, Sephardic Jews, and Cuban santeros. And now he has to live up to his legacy in the middle of a street war with lots of danger and other things. It's a book I'm very, very proud of, and it's very close to my heart. I've had a couple books in my career I've been like, yeah, that's the book of my heart, but this one is actually really for real, the book of my heart. Very connected to my own life and past and future, and I'm just really excited about it. So that's Ballad and Dagger, comes out in May.
Great. And I've got links to all your socials and your website down in the description. But
awesome.
Thank you for talking with me again and kind of helping me work through my emotions for Wave 2 so far. I look forward to doing it again, hopefully in Wave 3.
Yes,
and for the rest of the High Republic.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, man. It's always a pleasure. Take care of yourself. Stay safe.
And thank you all for watching, and may the Force be with you.